Welcome to Recalculating Small Business.
Dan, disability insurance is something most of us don't think about until we need it. Either as an employer or an employee, we just don't think about how important disability insurance plays in their lives. Here to talk about their recent survey and key trends is Amy Friedrich, President of U.S. Insurance Solutions at Principal. Amy, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, first, Amy, as we ask all our guests, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I have been with Principal Financial Group, about 17 years, and really the whole time I've been working with growing and helping other small business owners grow. And so the areas of the business that I'm specifically accountable for Principal include life insurance, disability insurance, and dental and vision. And I'm responsible for those things we deliver to individuals, but perhaps more importantly, even those things we deliver to small business owners. We have a footprint of about 120,000 small business employers that we work with across the nation, and I love the time I spend with them.
Well, Amy, I know a little bit about your background, but why did you choose a Principal and the insurance business to enter in the first place?
Sure. My background is actually, I came from management consulting. So I was with what was at the time Anderson Consulting and Accenture, and so I saw a lot of insurance businesses. I saw property casualty businesses, I saw life insurance businesses, and I kind of fell in love with group insurance. So I fell in love with small business owners who were trying to put the right benefits package. I knew there was a bunch going on in the medical field, and frankly, I kind of was even more excited not to be in the medical field, but to start to go into other benefits that really make a difference to small businesses and their employees, but maybe aren't very well understood. My background is actually as a communicator, so a writer, a journalist, organizational communication is my background, and I really feel like within insurance, we don't have enough people who can just kind of speak plain language and who can help people who really need protection understand what it means to be protected. So that's kind of where my passion for this whole thing came from.
Okay. Now, you had a recent survey, and you had some very interesting results. Can you tell us some of them?
Sure. We do an annual survey of what has ended up being over 600 small business owners. We've conducted this survey for a number of years, and the latest survey really asked a series of questions about, how business owners feel in terms of optimism, where their head's at in terms of the economy, and it asked some very specific questions down to kind of correlated to whether the business owner was a male or a female, what generation they were part of, and it asked them what benefits they provided. It asked them what they're doing with the capital they have on hand, what their plans for growth are. And one of the really interesting findings from this latest study was that in total, maybe 35% of the folks who offer disability insurance, if there are 30 or 35% of them that offer it, more of them are males, and only about half of the people who offer them are females, this disability benefit. And so we started asking, a series of questions about why that would be.
And you left us breathless. What are the questions?
Okay, let me give you some of the things that we've been thinking about. Small business owners are really reliant on financial professionals and advisors to get the right benefits in place at the right time. And one of the things that we're finding is that those financial professionals and advisors primarily are male. We're finding that males dealing with males, putting things in place together, building a trust relationship, building a relationship over time, is just a stronger connection. Females are not as much in the financial professional or advisor industry, and then you don't have female business owners working with them as frequently, and what's happening is they're not taking as much action on things like putting benefits in place, particularly the benefits beyond health insurance, which tends to be one that people understand the need for. They get that in place fairly early on. But when you start talking about group life insurance or group disability, those aren't happening as frequently with females. And I think part of it's because the discussion's simply not happening on the front end.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, in fact, the male brokers tend to bond with their male counterparts, but don't, for whatever reason, have that same bonding with the female.
And it might not even be bonding. It might even just be simply seeking them out. I think male brokers and advisors tend to have had historical patterns of finding business, building relationships that haven't given them access to female business owners. So I'm not even sure I could argue that if they had that access and if that access was there, you wouldn't find a great trusting bonding relationship. But I think just historically the access has been, male business owners working with male advisors. And again, I don't have a particular judgment on that, but I think in the end, what you end up with is female business owners who are placing a little less emphasis on some products that probably would be really helpful if their employees had access to and if the employers understood a little better.
I'm about to turn it over to Dan, but I have to ask a question. I think I read in your survey that only about 40% of small businesses have disability insurance.
Yeah, and for the smallest companies, it's even less than that. It can get down to 20 or 25% of them have disability insurance.
But also there's a correlation. If the owner has it, it's more likely that the employees have it. But if the owner does not have it, the employees don't. Did I hear that right?
Yep, that's
right?
true. So yes, that is true. And disability is one of those unique benefits that the employers. So when we look through all of the, over 100,000 business owners we work with, about 80% of them pay, when they've decided to put a disability benefit in place as a business owner, they pay for it themselves, 100%. So they don't make it a voluntary benefit, they make it an employer-paid benefit. So what you find is when the employer has it, when the employer feels strongly about income protection, they tend to make that available, even paying for it 100% for their employees.
Well, Dan, one more question, because I live and work in New Jersey, and in New Jersey you're mandatory to have some basic disability insurance. Am I? If you're a
that's correct.
corporation.
Yes.
Well, how
New
many
Jersey
states
is one
have
of
that?
It's a handful of states. It's actually growing a bit, and I want to make a distinction. There's a handful of states, maybe 3 to 5 states, that have historically had a state program that complements disability, and it typically focuses on short-term disability. So it's typically something that's going to be, if you're out and unable to work 6 months or less, there's going to be a requirement that an employer have something in place. Now, typically, what they have in place doesn't permit the amount of income replacement that you would find with private short-term disability plans. And also, maybe more importantly, it doesn't extend over into long-term disability. So when you think of long-term disability coverage, that long-term disability coverage is going to take into effect probably from 6 months to either when you can return to work or when you hit retirement age. And so those states that have complementary programs do not have long-term disability focus.
I have a lot more questions, but Dan, please jump in.
Thank you. There was a lot of discussion when Obamacare was being discussed as possible legislation of the impact of Obamacare onto the insurance purchasing desires and needs of young people versus older people. And there were people who said that the young people are saying we need a disability policy and we need a catastrophic policy. Did that ever really materialize?
I think those discussions really became about what is catastrophic insurance. So what is insurance that is going to take care of something that could potentially impact you so that you have $300,000 or $500,000 of costs out of pocket versus what would be, an essential coverage that just is going to get you the right preventive care that you need, that is going to get you the day-to-day practice. I would say where I saw that landing is there was the thought that if we relied on private industry to do things that are in the best interest of consumers, that they would point them towards maybe products that didn't help them as much as they've needed to. I would have argued right from the beginning that private industry was standing hip to hip with small business owners and with young consumers saying, you should purchase what you need. You should purchase what you think is going to give you the coverage for your time of life. So I think whatever really ended up happening with that is that there were some pretty important lessons learned about whether the issues related to purchasing insurance were those of not having access, not having education, not having technology, or if the issues related to purchasing of insurance were around, affordability and which state you live in and, sort of a complex set of rules and regulations. And so what I would argue is that insurance is still simply too complicated. It is confusing. People don't know what they've purchased, when they've purchased it, whether you're talking about the medical side or more the ancillary coverages. So I think we didn't really end up as an industry solving that problem through some of those discussions that started with a bunch of the Affordable Care Act legislation.
Right. The first thing that I thought I heard you say was that the sales force, which is predominantly male, would tend to predominantly call on male business owners, and therefore the female business owners were not getting a lot of coverage in terms of opportunities to make decisions about buying insurance coverage. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, we would love to study that statistically a bit more. So take what I said as an extension of what we know is that those people who work with financial professionals, advisors, agents, a local property casualty, broker, whoever that relationship might be, right. Those people who work with them tend to have a bunch of good things that happen to them. They have more excess capital. They have more confidence in their business. They feel like they have more retirement savings. They feel like they understand the value of their business better. So all of those things happen disproportionately more for male business owners than for female business owners. So I'm extrapolating, certainly, when I talk about where, sort of give genesis to where that relationship came from. But we know through our data that financial professional usage gives you better confidence, you have more benefits in place, and that males disproportionately participate in that than female business owners do.
If that is a need that you have recognized, and I'm not saying you personally, but your company, why wouldn't it become a significant new business opportunity for you because your competitors are not looking at that female market? Are you exploiting that opportunity, or are you in line with everybody else?
Let me take you through an example. I think one of the reasons, obviously, Principal does research like this is because we think it gives us greater insight into how we do more valuable things for our customers. And so one of the things that was sort of an early takeaway from us as we began to see this trend from our own data was that females tended to research more. Going and talking to an advisor or having an actual conversation with a broker, advisor, financial professional tended to be further to the end of that journey as opposed to the front end of that. And so research played a heavier role. So on our website, so if you look at principal.com and go in under the employee benefits section, one of the things we have rolled out is a benchmarking tool. It's a tool that allows you as a business owner to simply go in and put in things like region, what region of the country you are, what industry you're in, and about how many employees you have. And then for dental, disability, or life, you can compare what you currently have versus what an employer like you of similar size in a similar industry would have. What we're finding is those research mechanisms, those mechanisms that are about not forcing the conversation right at first, but allowing folks to do research, are ones that are appealing to certain demographics. They're appealing more to a generational demographic. Millennials tend to appeal more to that research first and then make a decision. And we have found a bit of gender imbalance in that. We have found that females tend to research and like doing something that is a bit more research-based before heading into an actual purchase conversation. So yes, what I would say is we're taking that knowledge and beginning to integrate that into our experience.
Would you say, not making any kind of a political statement, would you say that the underserving of the female executive has in fact stymied the growth of the female executive into what our options might be?
I think it's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of factors at play when you start looking at some of the gender differences between purchasing behavior, between how you build benefits packages, how you make decisions about your own personal life insurance protection. What I would say is that there are definite gender differences that we find on how people view protection. And that can be property casualty, that can be benefits, that can be simply talking about health care. But there is a thought that protection is more defined in terms of health insurance for some of the female business owners first, and then they kind of quickly fall off on some of the other things that we would argue could be part of a benefit package. Now, you also get into an interesting set of discussions about, are they disadvantaging themselves? Because when you're in an era of nearly really high employment, meaning you just can't find qualified candidates, the strength and depth of your benefit package becomes a huge motivator in both keeping talent and attracting new talent. So to the extent that your benefits construction sort of has a bias within there in terms of how you view protection and whose responsibility it is to pay for protection, I think potentially can have some negative impacts for female business owners.
There is clearly a difference in the tolerance for risk between males and females.
Yes.
And so perhaps women business owners, by their nature, may tend to be more conservative and be less risk takers. And when it comes to spending corporate money, they may be more guarded about that.
Well, and let me put it a slightly different way. They tend to invest in benefits that get high usage. So high usage benefits are going to be things like dental, vision, health insurance. They're going to be things that you see clearly an ability to have a transaction, to pay a premium, but then to clearly see that there's usage based on that premium. When you think of things about group life insurance and you think of group disability, the incidence rates on those are going to be significantly lower. And gladly, they're not a usage-based system. And so I would argue also it can be as much about seeing the benefit for the dollars that are being put out there and being able to clearly articulate those to themselves and their employees, as much as it is about, an investment philosophy and kind of whether you're conservative or a little bit riskier in those investments. Does that make some sense in thinking about it that way?
Do you think, does your survey give you any indication of single male or female owners or divorcees, males or females?
We only have a group, because we go pretty deep with these surveys, and so we only do it with about 600 to 650 small business owners. So what we begin to run into is we don't have statistical significance when you start to cut that discreetly. So I would say our data is not the best at those subgroupings of categories, but if we extended the survey size, which again we see some potential interest in doing that at some point, I believe we could get down to those smaller categories. But today's data is not going to give us good information on that.
What are you doing as a company to provide opportunities on the sales side for female agents?
I think it has been recognized in the industry that not only do we have need for more gender diversity in our agent and advisor population, but that we also need to make sure we're getting some generational diversity. We want to have younger agents able to feel like they can make a true career out of this. So one of the things we're doing that's gender specific is we have a specific curriculum that is really based on women in sales. It talks through, it gives a space to network, but bigger than a space to network, it gives the ability for women to hear sales practices, to see case scenarios on what has worked or not worked historically, and to be able to provide them with a forum where they can talk about what...
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. What success means to them. And so that Women in Sales track has been one of the kind of more popular programs we've put in place in the last 3 to 4 years, and it has increased our ability to have high-profile women in leadership positions in our sales organizations that's moving them through our pipeline faster.
So given the statistic of last Friday of a 3.8% unemployment rate and some areas of the country approaching 2%, I saw where Vermont is offering a $10,000 incentive for a down payment for a house if you'll relocate to Vermont to get a job. Are you finding it hard with this enhanced education and training program to find new salespeople, period, and female salespeople?
I would say what's notable about, so keep in mind for Principal, our headquarters, certainly for our U.S. insurance operations, is in Des Moines, Iowa. And so one of the things we have in Iowa is a really vibrant secondary and postgraduate education access. So we've got a bunch of Iowa independent colleges that are turning out graduates at high rates. We've got access to great state university systems. And so one of the things that we've done is very deeply ingrained programs where we find that highest talent, often with a special emphasis on diversity, whether that be gender, ethnic diversity, so that we can have those infusing our leadership development programs. So I would say for our key positions, what we're finding is we still have good access to a great talent pool. But part of that is just, being in the Midwest and having access to a bunch of highly educated undergraduate institutions.
Good. Don, back to you.
Amy, first off, how can people, our audience, reach you?
Sure. They can, Principal.com. So Principal with a P-A-L, P-R-I-N-C-I-P-A-L, Principal.com is a great landing page. certainly, when I think of our insurance offerings, you can kind of get into the insurance offerings from there, but that's going to give you a great landing page, and it's going to be, you can find my picture on the leadership team and find my contact information as well.
Well, I had an English teacher that told me the difference between principal and principal was the principal is your pal and the principal is your rule. But that was a long time. That was a long time
We are
ago.
your pal. We are your pal. Think of it that way. You got it.
I see many advertisements for Aflac, and it's retirement dollars in your pocket, particularly. Is this the type of insurance that a principal does, or is it a more basic?
So when I think of Aflac, and again, they've done some really nice work branding and kind of getting to employee populations and kind of talking them through what other supplemental insurance they can provide. So Principal does provide things like accident and critical illness, and those would be similar products to what Aflac provides. Probably the bigger part of our planning and focus, though, is working with small business owners, not just on things to supplement their business, but on things that can really help them build their benefits. So whether they're building retirement benefits, which again, Principal has a huge footprint in terms of retirement planning, or whether they're looking at more of their specialty benefits like dental and vision and life and disability. We like to work with the business owners so that they can understand the full value of their business and get all their protection needs met. Aflac has tended to be a little bit more on the supplemental insurance, which again is a vibrant industry in and of itself, but we've tended to be more on the pure group insurance, get your employees' needs met through great benefits design.
An employee develops cancer, okay, and is out for periods of time. How does that work, insurance of that type? There's the short term and the long term. Can you explain the differences and how?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you develop cancer, cancer is going to be one of those things that is a very common reason for people needing to be away from work for a while. So when I look at our block of business and I look at the disability coverage people have who have cancer, again, what we're seeing is some really great return to work rates. We're seeing great treatment options for people, but they typically, if you're going to be out less than 6 months, you're typically relying on your short-term disability plan. So short-term disability plan is going to get you up to that 6 months, and you're typically going to replace about 60% of your income on a typical plan design. If your treatments and your reasons for needing to be gone from work begin to extend beyond that 6-month period, you're typically moving over into a long-term disability policy. Now, if you've bought them from a company like Principal where you've bought both your short-term and your long-term disability together, we try to make that process as seamless as possible. We're going to know you've been to a doctor. We're going to understand what the diagnosis is, and we're going to understand that you're probably going to need a little bit more time away from work to try to do the right things to heal. And so that movement over into long-term disability would be relatively seamless. That long-term disability coverage is going to either go until you can return to work, or typically people have designed that around what is kind of the Social Security retirement age. So depending upon that age, it could potentially go all the way up to 65 or 66 or 67. But the vast majority of those people who utilize our policies need disability insurance for about 2 to 3 years. The vast majority of them don't go beyond the 2 to 3 year mark.
Do the rates that the employer pays, is it based on the usage? If they have 2 or 3 people out in 1 year and nobody and none in the following year, do the rates vary, or is it based on a per employee basis? How do you underwrite these policies?
Yep. And it's really different how you underwrite if you're primarily in the small group marketplace, which is where Principal primarily is, or whether you're underwriting a large business. So if you're underwriting a large business that maybe employs 10,000 people, you can go to their own prior experience and set the rate based upon what they've experienced in terms of disability rates on their own population. For Principal, since we write, the average size of a business we're working with is someone who employs 40 people. So what we're using are manual rates. So these are rates that basically take into account our entire block. We know that there's, pooling of group insurance risk. We understand that that's going to happen from case to case. And so typically when you're using more of a small group rate, it doesn't matter as much what's happening at that specific employer. It matters more what's happening over the entire block of business, because we know that shared risk is a concept that's present in group insurance. So in that particular case, we would look at the demographics, like if you've changed, if the gender or age has changed of your group, but we look at it just more as a small piece of information. The larger piece is just that we're going to give you a manual group rate.
The pool, I won't say untapped, but the pool that we're talking more and more about with people is those people who have already retired, who for various reasons, either financial or emotional, are thinking about coming back into the workforce. So you're going to be dealing with an older employee or consultant or whatever the right term is. That's going to have some impact on plan design, isn't it?
Yes, it is going to have impact on plan design, although I would argue the impact probably is a little bit bigger on maybe group life plan design, which tends to take into account that, to keep coverages really affordable, you might have to do some reductions in the benefits if you start getting a bunch of employees that are maybe over age 70 or over age 75 or over age 80, but still actively in the workforce. For disability coverage, keep in mind that we tend to align with the normal Social Security retirement age. So some of the programs that people want to design for group disability, we end up having to do some special planning and special processes if you've got workforce that's beyond normal, what's known as normal Social Security retirement age. It's still possible to do good plan design work, but it becomes something that's a little more complicated. And sometimes you have to lean on individual products as opposed to group products to get the right level of coverage for the right folks at the right time.
Does the Principal do any work with affinity groups?
Because our focus historically has been with, great small business employer planning, we have tended to not use affinity groups because they haven't had as much of the definition of a employer-employee relationship. And so we have tended to be able to find the relationships we want, grown at the pace that we've wanted, really with, having great relationships with brokers and employers who can get us directly to those small employer groups. So affinity marketing has not been a big focus for us.
Back to you, Don.
We were talking with Amy Friedrich. She's president of U.S. Insurance Solutions, a Principal. A link to her website will be on recalculating.biz tonight.
Dan Perkins here from recalculating.biz. I want to tell you about Bob Bethel. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. Dan Perkins with your featured book.
Dan, Dave Hiller, Small Business Segment Leader for SunTrust Bank, is here to speak with us regarding SunTrust's recent small business survey and some of the other things that he's found in almost 10 years of looking at the small business area. Dave, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Dan. Happy to be here.
Well, Dave, first tell us a little bit about your background before we go into anything about the survey.
Okay. Well, for the past 5 years, I've been with SunTrust Bank and responsible for the small business segment there. I've got over 20 years total in financial services, including, as you mentioned, the past 10 years focused specifically on the small business segment in a variety of different roles, from product management to segment leadership. So over that time, I have really developed an admiration and an affinity for small business owners. I've spent a lot of time with small business owners over that period and really view them as the backbone of our economy, a source of tremendous innovation in our country, and really just admire the way that small business owners have the courage to get up every day, pursue their dream, take a risk, make something happen. So it's been really exciting to be part of that segment of our economy and to serve them as best as we can with financial products and services.
Well, that's really great to hear. And Dan and I both share that admiration for small business. That's why we started the program, and that's how things have progressed. Now, Dave, tell us about the survey that you did and what came out of it.
Sure. This is a survey that we do annually, and the purpose is to help us understand what business owners are thinking about the economy, about their financial practices, really to help us serve them better and provide more relevant guidance. So just a few facts about the survey audience. Over 500 small business owners participated. It was a national survey, so not limited to SunTrust footprint. Had about 50 questions. We had a representative variety of industries participating in the survey. One interesting thing I noted when looking at the demographics was that 40% of our respondents were female business owners, and 27% of our respondents were represented minority-owned small businesses. So that's a trend that we see, and we're very excited about continuing, and we certainly saw that in our respondent base. The survey covered 4 major topics. How do small business owners feel about the economy and their financial health? What are their priorities for the next year? And then 2 sections that are more specific to different business stages, a section on business transition, and a section for new businesses around how they started their business, how they approach staffing, marketing, and lessons learned. So let me just summarize the findings, and then happy to go into more detail in any one of those areas that you'd like. In terms of overall views on the economy, we found that 64% of business owners view the current economy and business health as strong. That's up from 55% last year. So, real view of strength in the economy. On the flip side, however, most small business owners still feel a lot of stress related to operating their business and their finances. They have a clear focus on growing revenue and profitability. So if you ask them where they're going to spend their time, it's around those 2 areas. One of the things that came out is an increasing interest in digital marketing to drive revenue. We can get into that a little bit more later. Then we also have some interesting insights around how business owners are thinking about transition, why it's important, how they're planning for it, and as I mentioned, around starting a business. So I would say overall the survey paints a positive picture of small business health. I would say it also highlights the reality of the stress that every small business owner faces as a person that has to wear multiple hats to make their business successful. And the other thing that it highlights and that we see every day as we talk to business owners is that for a small business owner, your business finances and your personal finances are very intertwined.
To summarize, Dave Hiller, the outlook in terms of the economy is up. Small businesses are concerned about growing their business, and that their income, their personal and their business are intertwined. That's a quick summary. Did I hear it right?
Yes, that's right.
Well, out of this, before I turn it over to Dan, out of all of this, what were the two most striking things you found from the survey?
Well, I think one is the extent to which small business owners are interested in digital marketing. If you think about, the average age of a business owner in America is in their 50s. A third are over 60. So most business owners are not digital native. Most business owners are looking to their children or their grandchildren to teach them about all things digital. But they also recognize that digital marketing is a very, very powerful way to increase marketing efficiency and effectiveness. So, and they hear terms like social media, search engine optimization, paid search, online advertising, thrown all around. They're in every business magazine. As they talk to their peer business owners, they hear about that. But it's hard to be an expert in that. So what we saw in the survey is that business owners view investments in digital marketing to profitable segments and around profitable products is one of the best ways and most efficient ways to drive business growth. And they're looking to increase their investment around that. They're looking to increase their knowledge base around that, and really use that as a key driver of their business.
Dan?
I want you to clarify, if you can, for me and for our listeners, what you mean when you say digital. And before you answer, I'm asking really from the standpoint, are you talking about e-commerce, where they're using the internet to find new customers and new market segments? Or if not, what do you mean by digital?
Right. In terms of, those comments were really around digital marketing as an avenue to drive growth. And what I mean by that is you used the term e-commerce, I believe.
Right.
What I mean is using the power of the internet and the medium that it affords to reach your target client in the most effective way with the most succinct and hard-hitting message for them. And so what we see is, as a business owner looks at their business, and let's just take a simple example of their website that they have. There are ways to, and I'm sure you've had guests on here before that can go into much greater detail. There are ways that you can optimize the presentation of your website and the language on your website to reach specific audiences and to drive traffic from when people are searching for specific terms to your website.
Right.
You can do that through paid search, so paying for search terms, and there's a very involved process. You can be as sophisticated as you want to be in terms of optimizing your paid search, but that's really what I mean, using those kinds of tools to get your message out to the right people and to be as clear as possible with the message to those target clients.
When was this survey taken, Dave?
It was earlier this year, so in February and March.
Okay. So I'm wondering is, for the previous 8 years, small business has been under an enormous amount of pressure, government regulations, a stagnant economy going nowhere, and small businesses wondering whether they could functionally survive. They've lived so long under that kind of mental stress that when Mr. Trump came in and made all these promises, even though he started to deliver on them, I wonder if there is still some uncertainty as to whether or not he can continue to deliver, or are we going to fall back the way they were when we were under the previous administration?
I'll talk about what we found in the survey, and I think you're absolutely right about that. Any business owner that's been around for, let's say, 10 years has lived through a very tough economic cycle. Now, for the past several, I think we've seen economic improvement. So, the trough was probably 2009, 2010, 2011 for most business owners, and certainly as we've been watching our numbers, for most business owners, things have been improving since then. I think what we see in the survey is sort of a dual effect of the environment that you spoke about. One is that they see the economy as very strong right now. They see tax reform as good for their business, and they have specific ways that they're going to take advantage of that tax reform. At the same time, they're worried about costs. They're worried about economic uncertainty. I think that reflects the nature of the past 10 years. Things are good now and getting better, but there's a feeling that, 2 years from now, it could go the other way. And I think related to that, I think the uncertainty around taxes and government regulation is always a factor. So for a business owner, you like to see the tax reform. It had very distinct, I think, advantages for most business, but you don't know when new regulations are coming up. You don't know when the tax code's going to change again. And so I think there's a level of just innate, underlying caution that we see even in the midst of optimism.
We have talked to a number of people who have done studies around the first of the year, early part of the first quarter. And overwhelmingly, we've heard from business leaders, small business leaders, that they really haven't figured out how the tax bill is going to affect them, because at that time, it had only been passed in October and went into effect January 1st. So they're still trying to figure out the tax bill, and maybe they're getting better at it as we get further into the year. But the other thing is, we came through an 8-year period where the average annual gross domestic product was less than 2%. And now, last Friday, we had the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta projecting that gross domestic product for the second quarter of 2018 will be 5.3%. There are probably small business people today who have never seen a 4 or a 5% GDP. And so I was surprised, and maybe it has to do with the earliness of the survey. One of the things that has become clear is that last Friday we had a 3.8% unemployment rate. Was there any discussion in your survey about finding qualified people?
Yes, there was. Certainly in terms of what businesses are concerned about in terms of growth, finding qualified employees is certainly one of the things on the list. I think it's interesting. One of the findings in the section around starting a business, I thought had some great information around that. And we asked business owners who were less than 5 years in business about their staffing strategies. And 60% of them used part-time or contract labor or interns or consultants for flexibility. So I think businesses are finding more creative and innovative ways to address the overall labor shortage. Certainly, they're investing in their hiring practices and their benefits and their wages. We see that in surveys that we see from business owners. But also, I think they're getting creative, and I think they're looking to, other avenues to drive the expertise they need in their business.
We had a guest on last week who was in charge of the small business at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and he was communicating to us their most recent survey of small business. And one of the things we were talking about with him, as we just started talking to you, is finding resources. And I find it fascinating that your survey was talking about flexibility, and really what that translates into is variable overhead as opposed to fixed overhead. They can control their costs by doing gig employment. But one of the things we talked about a little bit with him, and I'm not sure it would be in your survey, but I would certainly be interested in, David, in your response, is the opportunity to recruit recently retired from a full-time job where a company could gain great expertise and experience, but do it, as you're pointing out, on a part-time basis or project or whatever. Do you see any trend in that?
I think that is a tremendous opportunity for small business owners. If you look at every hire, every person you bring on board as a small business owner is a critical employee. You can, whether they're part-time or contract or full-time, you can't afford to make a mistake. And I think the benefit that business owners would see in reaching out to older, maybe retired potential workers, it's going to be very easy to evaluate the cultural fit. It's going to be very easy to be straightforward and candid about what you need. And I think most people in that situation will be straightforward and candid with you. So I see that as a tremendous potential opportunity for business owners, and a way that they can preserve flexibility and get very, very valuable experience and loyal resources to help.
You used the word in your discussion with Don about businesses in transition. And I made a note about that. Transitioning to what?
Well, what we mean there is, a third of business owners in America are over age 60. And so as we talked to them and surveyed them about their business and their financial planning, over half of them are planning to rely on their business as a primary source of retirement funds. So as they think about that, it's very important that they understand the value of their business, that they understand the steps that they can take to increase the value of their business, and that they have a really solid plan for transition. And that assuming you're operating a successful business and have done right by your retirement up to that point, business owners should be looking at least 3 to 5 years out as they're thinking about transition, meeting with an attorney, meeting with their CPA, meeting with their banker, meeting with their financial advisor, and developing a very clear and disciplined plan for transitioning their business, whether that's going to be a sale, whether that's going to be bringing in family members or management to run it so you could step back some. It's really important that business owners do that. And in the survey, what we found is that almost all business owners believe that's important, but many have not conducted that level of planning yet. So it's a big area of both opportunity as well as need in the small business segment.
I know. I'm a registered investment advisor, and I'm amazed at the number of people in their 50s and 60s that I work with when I first get them have no wills. Anyway, let me give it back to Don. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Dave, I'd like to go. You said in the survey that women are about 40% of the respondents. Do you have any figures as to women-led businesses at SunTrust? We're talking, by the way, with David Hiller. He's a segment head for small business for SunTrust. We were talking about a survey the bank has completed, but I'd like to go a little deeper and say, have you segmented out female owners, and are there any special things that you noticed in the survey or in your interactions with them that we should be talking about?
I don't have the exact numbers of SunTrust business owners in terms of the percent that are women, but what we do see is in increasing proportion that are women business owners. And, that relates to business owners have a set of needs that's common. But women business owners, while they have very similar needs to male business owners in terms of financial practices, they sometimes approach things in a little different way, as you would expect. So on the front lines, in our branches, and with our service teammates and business bankers, we're aware of that, and they interact with those business clients every day. And, we train them to listen to every person's individual needs. That's really key for the way we approach this. Whether you're a male-owned business, a female-owned business, a minority-owned business, a part-time business owner, a home-based business, our frontline teammates are trained to ask questions, to understand your individual situation and unique needs, and use that to develop a plan.
Well, what did you? Is there anything in particular you noticed that how women business owners differ?
I think what we see is women business owners, and I'll go back to my earlier statement. For the most part, women business owners have the same business-related needs as men, in terms of they've got a business they're running, they have a set of financial needs, and we approach those in a common way. So I would say, from what we've seen, there's more similarities than there are differences between male and female business owners.
Well, I've seen a survey which said that there's more of a tendency for women business owners to bring family members into the business than male members, which I thought, at the time I saw that about a month ago, I thought was an interesting look at things. You haven't seen any of that in your survey or anything, have you?
That's interesting. We didn't ask that question specifically, so I don't have any data on that. But we do often see, and I would say whether it's men or women, we do often see when they come into the branch to talk to us that they will bring a spouse along, because as we talked about earlier, when you're a small business owner, your business and your personal finances are extremely intertwined. So that doesn't surprise me at all, what that survey found.
Well, from year to year, have you noticed a difference in an increase in minority ownership in the survey?
I don't have stats from the survey at my fingertips on minority business ownership, but I can tell you, just being in the business for the past 10 years, I have personally noticed an increase in minority business owners. It's really amazing to me, and many of them are first-generation immigrant. So it's amazing to me how I would say the minority business owner population is growing, is taking advantage of the opportunities that we have, and I think is becoming increasingly confident in the way that they approach business ownership and financial services. So I've seen that personally as I've been out in the markets over the past 10 years.
Well, Dan gets to ask the last question.
So I would like to know, you're going to focus on this optimistic issue. Are they optimistic for the near term, meaning the next 12 to 24 months, or are they optimistic longer term, or have they been able to qualify for you their turn and their trend in how optimistic they are?
We didn't put a time frame in the survey. I think the fact that that 64% see the economy and their business health as strong, and only 5% in our survey saw that it was weak, is a really good indication to me that it's more than a 12-month outlook. I think business owners naturally look out several years. Their business is their livelihood. So the way I interpret that is it's a stronger, both short-term and long-term confidence that they have in the economy and in their business health.
Super. Thank you. Don, back to you.
We've been talking with David Hiller. He's small business segment leader for SunTrust Bank, and he's been talking about a very encouraging small business survey. A link to his website will be on Recalculating Biz tonight.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz.